Washington, D.C. wants to reform its criminal code by reducing maximum penalties. But Biden wants to stop that from happening, and Democrats are furious. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Matt Gnezda, filling in today for Chris Chappell. Washington, D.C. wants to reform its criminal code, but it hasn't been an easy journey, and President Biden is making it harder. There's a Republican-led bill making its way through Congress that would overturn the D.C. criminal code reform, and Biden says that if it comes across his desk, he'll sign it. And Democrats are not happy about it. It all started with the Washington, D.C. criminal code. It's not surprising that D.C. wants to reform its criminal code since there haven't been significant revisions since the code's creation in 1901. The criminal code is so old that it makes references to stables and steamboats, as well as bans on common scolds, a term for angry women who disturb the peace. Common scolds? That language is clearly a problem. D.C. needs to update that to a ban on Karens. That way everyone understands the law. The code has been updated piecemeal since 1901, but it's never had a complete overhaul, which is why a study in the year 2000 by 3 Brooklyn Law School professors ranked DC's criminal code as one of the worst in the nation, probably because they didn't know about Karens in the year 2000. But something needed to be done, so DC officials took up the task. They spent 16 years doing research and wrote 4,700 pages of commentary. And ultimately, last year, the D.C. Council unanimously passed a 450-page overhaul bill led by the D.C. Criminal Code Reform Commission. According to the DCist, outdated terms and definitions were tossed out, crimes were redefined, new gradated sentences were drawn up to match the severity of specific offenses, and new criminal justice policies were proposed. Not bad for a mere 16 years and 4,700 pages of work. But there's a lot of controversy surrounding some of the changes. The bill eliminates life sentences and gets rid of mandatory minimums for every crime but first-degree murder. It also changes some of the maximum sentences. For example, armed burglary of a building would go from a maximum penalty of 60 years to just 8, and armed carjacking would go from 40 years to just 8 or 12. People who support the change point out that few felons ever get the maximum sentence anyway, and that judges can still stack sentences when multiple crimes happen at the same time. They also say the reforms aren't about going soft on crime, but about making a more coherent, consistent, and proportionate legal system. After all, as bad as armed carjacking is, they argue it shouldn't be equivalent to a second-degree murder or be more heavily penalized than second-degree sexual assault. Also, it's not as though criminals are thinking about how long they'll be in prison before deciding whether to commit a crime. Although maybe they should. Has the FBI ever thought of starting a website? Go to crimetimes.com and see how long you'll spend in prison if you get caught for armed burglary. 60 years? I'll just get a job. But those legal reforms aren't the only reasons for the changes. There's also the racial equity argument. Supporters of the reforms say that African Americans are disproportionately convicted of violent crimes, so the new laws need to fix that. Paul Butler is a member of the Code Revision Commission Advisory Board and a law professor at Georgetown University. He said the bill would help cure some of DC's vast racial inequities and make every community in the city safer. But some Democrats worry that reducing maximum sentences will send the wrong signal regardless. Matt Graves, the U.S. Attorney for D.C., told the D.C. Council that a statutory minimum shouldn't be based on the average of what judges sentence, but should be reserved for the worst possible version of certain offenses. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has her reservations as well. Bowser pointed out that if the maximum penalty is high and the usual sentences are somewhat lower, then it stands to reason that lowering the maximum penalty will reduce the usual sentences even further. She also had issues with another change, holding jury trials in all misdemeanor cases that could lead to jail time. She fears that will swamp DC's Superior Court and leave dangerous people on the street as they await trial. Ultimately, Bowser's concerns led her to veto the criminal code. And even the Washington Post editorial board said that DC's criminal code bill could make the city more dangerous. They're especially concerned with how gun offenders would be less penalized and how they could reoffend more quickly. But Bowser's veto wasn't the end of it. DC lawmakers overrode Bowser's veto with a 12-1 vote. They also decried fear-mongering and misinformation about the bill, because 16 years' worth of work is just too much to let go to waste. But the debate over DC's criminal code has reached Congress, and now it's putting President Biden in a bind. I'll explain how after the break. Welcome back. Earlier this year, DC lawmakers overrode Mayor Bowser's veto to pass a massive criminal code rewrite for the city. But last month, Republicans in Congress stepped in, arguing that the reform would make DC more dangerous. Congress is allowed to do this because DC isn't a state, and it's not a normal city either. Under the U.S. Constitution, it's a special federal district, which is why Congress has the final say over what laws get passed there. But it isn't exactly common for Congress to overturn DC laws. The last time it happened was in 1991, when DC wanted to build an office and residential complex near the FBI headquarters. This time around, House Republicans were joined by 31 Democrats to pass a bill that would repeal DC's criminal code. The final tally was 250 to 173. The vote now goes to the Senate. Not surprisingly, Representative Angie Craig was one of the Democrats voting in favor. After being assaulted the day of the vote, I'm sure Craig wasn't in the mood to be lenient on criminals. So now the vetoers who vetoed the vetoer are getting vetoed. Most Democrats, especially those in DC, though, don't like this, not only because progressive crime regulations were struck down, but because they were struck down by Congress. Many Democrats believe that DC should be able to make its own decisions. No surprise, since DC generally leans progressive. DC's non-voting representative, Eleanor Norton, even insinuated that Republicans believe DC's predominantly black and brown residents are unworthy or incapable of governing themselves. This drama all ties into the ongoing push for DC statehood. President Biden is in favor of statehood. He said before that more than 700,000 people in DC suffer taxation without representation in Congress, and that it's an affront to the democratic values on which the U.S. was founded. With that in mind, most Democrats expected Biden to veto the Republican-led bill. After all, in February, the White House's Office of Management and Budget issued a statement that opposed that specific House bill and said, while we work toward making Washington, D.C. the 51st state of our union, Congress should respect the District of Columbia's autonomy to govern its own local affairs. But 1 month later, Biden blindsided Democrats and changed his tune. Last week, Biden said that he wouldn't veto the Republican bill and would instead allow Congress to overturn D.C.'s crime bill. He tweeted out saying that he supports D.C. statehood and home rule, but not D.C.'s changes put forward over the mayor's objections. In other words, D.C. should make its own decisions, except for this one. Some Democrats didn't take this lightly, as one anonymous House Democrat texted to a reporter for The Hill. Very eloquent. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez insisted that D.C. has the right to govern itself even if it passes laws that the president disagrees with. And Nancy Pelosi said that at the very least, he shouldn't have given them a heads up. Why did Biden change his mind? According to White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, he didn't.
There was never a change of heart on where we were with the SAP. The SAP, the way that it's laid out, speaks to the president supporting D.C. statehood. But it did not indicate what the president would do should the bill come to his desk. It did not say that. It did not lay that out. Now we're communicating that very clearly.
That's strange. I thought saying that you oppose a bill would imply that you would reject it, which is why I'm not a politician. As always, it comes down to optics. If Biden supported D.C.'s crime bill, he and Democrats would give Republicans fuel for attacks, claiming that they're soft on crime, especially ahead of the 2024 elections. So it's sensitive timing, especially when crime in D.C. is on the rise, especially for homicide, sex abuse, and carjackings. Democrats took pretty major House losses in New York during last November's election, and Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot lost her re-election primary. Both of these are signs that Democrats could lose power if they look too soft on crime. So it makes sense that Biden is telling Democrats to get tough on crime, and that he's trying to look tough on crime himself. Now, a number of Senate Democrats are publicly saying they'll vote for the measure to reject D.C.'s criminal code reform. And despite disagreements, many Democrats still want to back Biden for a 2024 presidential campaign. I guess party unity and winning are more important than having a real debate over real issues. What else is new? So, what do you think of D.C.'s criminal code reform? Leave your comments below. And if you like this show, remember that we rely mainly on direct support from viewers like you. All it takes is as little as $1 per episode over on our crowdfunding website, Patreon. Visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered for more. Click the link below. Once again, I'm Matt Gnezda. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.